My name is Stephanie McGary. I am a counselor and a play therapist. I've worked at Momentous for a while in their therapy department. I'm a Dallas native. Right now, I have the pleasure of working on a really cool project in Memphis, Tennessee, with a lot of our Porter Leaf schools. And then we also work with Perea Elementary. We've worked with Perea Preschool. And I serve as the mental health coach on our project. So working alongside educators and teachers and really learning the best way to provide social emotional learning and social emotional health to teachers and students in Memphis, Tennessee. So that's who I am.
And I'm Tara. I'm also a mental health coach with Momentous. I spend most of my time supporting an elementary school here in Dallas. And I'm also a mom to an almost 2-year-old. And before I had my daughter, I had the opportunity to come out to Memphis a few times to visit one of the Porter Lee schools and our Memphis partnerships up there. So thank you guys for being with us this morning. We're really looking forward to today.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I saw there was a big percentage of people who had never been to a Momentous webinar before, so we'll tell you a little bit about who we are. So Momentous Institute is an organization in Dallas, Texas. It's been around since about 1920. This was here kind of in existence, which is really cool. We have 3 branches to our organization, and if you look at that green branch, our therapeutic services, that is the oldest branch of our organization. We currently do community mental health, providing therapy for children and families. We have a therapeutic after school program, so that's kind of our foundation. If you move over a little bit in that red section, you see Momentous School. We also have a laboratory school, pre-K 3 through 5th grade, where we really work and look at what it looks like to work at the intersection of mental health and education. And then you'll see that purple bar, the research and training, which is the branch that Tara and I work out of. And that's where we kind of take what we've learned from the therapeutic services, take what our school is learning, and most importantly, take what we've learned from our project work in Dallas, at our schools in Dallas, and also at our schools and partners in Memphis, Tennessee. We take all that, we do research, and we really try to find best practices to help and support teachers when it comes to social emotional health and social emotional learning. So let's look at that definition of social emotional health. This is the definition that we work from at Momentous Institute. And if you've worked with us before, you've seen the definition. You've also seen the really cool hand motions that go with it. I'll spare you. To understand and manage one's emotions, reactions, and relationships. So this is really our foundation when we're working with teachers and families. And today we're going to be talking about reactions and relationships, specifically when it comes to where we are now with COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're in. So we'll talk to parents. We're talking to, of course, family service workers who work with parents and anyone who has a close connection with children. That's where we will be grounded today. So we will go ahead and start with our presentation.
And to set the tone this morning, this is a letter that Stephanie found on social media that we thought really resonated with us. So it's a letter to parents from teachers. Dear parents, do not stress about schoolwork. When the time is, I will work to get your children back on track. I am a teacher, and that's my superpower. What I can't fix is the social emotional trauma that prevents the brain from learning. So right now, I just need you to do your best. Share your calm, share your strength, and share your laughter with your children. No kids are ahead, no kids are behind. Your children are exactly where they need to be. With love, all teachers on planet Earth. So we're excited to to show that by keeping your children loved and safe with you, you're already doing exactly what you need to do, and you're already doing enough. We can go ahead and move on to the next one, Stephanie. So we're going to talk about the 3 topics that we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about sharing the news, so talking about COVID-19 with your kiddos, how you can help your children manage their fears, and how to keep learning going. So I'm going to start by talking about the news. I think at this point, many of us have already started navigating this with our kiddos. I know it can be overwhelming and scary not knowing what to say or how much to say, or if you should even tell your kids what's going on. So we're going to go that we have, and we actually pulled this from PBS Kids, and at the end of the webinar, Stephanie and I are going to share a list of resources with you. So we'll share that resource and a few others. But what I would want to say is really the most important thing is not what you say, but how you say it. So kids are going to be looking to you, looking to your face, looking to your tone, and kind of looking for, does my parent, does my caregiver think I'm safe? And that's what they're going to be mostly paying attention to. So when you communicate with your kids about this, the most important thing is just kind of to communicate with your body language and your tone that things are going to be okay. And it's good to share the truth. It's good to share age-appropriate facts and to correct any misinformation. So you can start with your kids with any questions they might have. Know that it's totally normal at this age for kids to kind of go to extremes. So they might be like, oh my God, if we leave the house, are we going to die? Like, that's a totally normal reaction to have. And you want to go ahead and correct that and say, no, if we leave the house, we're not going to die. You could relate COVID-19 to, when you have a cold or the flu, it's kind of like that. Most people that get it, they stay home and they rest and their families take care of them and they're okay. And when they need them, there's lots of doctors and nurses and wonderful people who are working to help us keep safe. So sharing age-appropriate facts, correcting any misinformation they might have, and reassuring them that they're safe with you. So mom's here to take care of you. We're staying at home to take care of ourselves. And the last one, emphasizing what we can do to help. So all of us, adults and kids, we kind of feel the most powerless when we don't feel like there's anything that we can do. So by sharing with your kids, when you wash your hands, when we stay at home from school, we are all doing things to help keep everyone in our community safe. That will really help kids to feel empowered, like they're doing something to contribute. So I think after that, Stephanie is going to talk a little bit manage children's fears during this time.
So we know for sure that even as adults, that during this whole pandemic, we've talked to so many teachers and so many staff members about the wave of feelings that they've been feeling from at the beginning when they first heard, oh yay, summer break early, and then how we felt like, okay, it's getting a little serious, and there was just this wave of emotions that we were through as adults. And so that's not too different from what our children go through, and especially our preschoolers go through, because they can't quite, of course, communicate to you verbally, mom, dad, grandma, this is really stressing me out. I'm feeling a little anxious. They can't tell us that. But what they can do is use their behavior to communicate to us that they're feeling some kind of way. So we are going to look at a list of behaviors that you may or may not see. Your children, your parents, and your families know their children better than anything, but just a list of things that you may or may not see. And we taken this from, we got a lot of the resources from the National Child Trauma Network. And a lot of what they talk about is, because we're kind of in the middle, again, you may have seen a lot of this at the beginning. So most of this may be, oh, that's what that was. And also preparing for the future. So as we prepare to go back into school, maybe this fall, next year, we really don't know. But as we prepare for another big shift, be thinking about these things may pop up. So how can I be mindful and aware that these are some of the behaviors that I may see throughout as we prepare to go back to school. And so one of those things that we see a lot in our preschoolers is a fear of being alone, kind of fear of being by themselves. We had a teacher that bathroom. Now, I already couldn't go to the bathroom, but now it's like they want to know where I am all the time. Now, her kids are 16 and 17, so it was kind of like, ooh, interesting. But definitely a fear of being alone. You may see an increase in this and them wanting to know that they're safe and there's an adult for them. Also, some bad dreams. Some scary dreams. You may have heard about your kids maybe waking up in the middle of the night or telling you, in the morning, I had a really bad dream yesterday. It may have nothing with COVID-19 or the pandemic. The key is to think about the theme of the dream. Was it scary? And how do you reassure their safety after they've kind of shared that with you? Speech difficulties is something that we may ignore sometimes. A lot of our preschoolers sometimes have a hard time processing information. And when they're anxious or when they're a little afraid or scared, they also have some trouble expressing it. You may hear increase in stuttering or just really having a hard time. That could also be just one of those behaviors that you might see showing you that I'm a little anxious right now, or I'm a little nervous, or something has shifted and I'm having a hard time getting it from my brain out of my mouth. So definitely some speech difficulties. And this is a huge one, right? Loss of bladder control or bowel control. It's typical that at this age, you may see regression in potty training accidents. You may see some regression in using the bathroom, having at nighttime, having accidents at night or during the day. And you may be like, what is happening? We potty trained and we were here and we got it. But it's typical. You may see some going back and forth. And normally once a sense of routine, we'll talk about that later, has happened, they'll get that sense of control back. But you may see an increase in that. Change in appetite. This is a big one, not just for children, but for adults as well. When this pandemic started to happen on either end of the spectrum, our children may be eating less. You may be like, it's breakfast, they may not be eating as much, or where I am on the spectrum, eating more, stress eating, and they're hungry all the time. So you may see some changes in appetite as well when kids are trying to communicate to you that there's some kind of fear, or I'm feeling a little out of control in this moment. And lastly, the big one, the increase in tantrums, whining, back to that clinging behavior. So these are 6 things that really may show up, may have already shown up, and you're like, yes, that was it. Or, this is us getting prepared for when we hit that next big shift of going back to school, or anytime there's a shift in kind of their environment, these things may kind of ebb and flow. So once you see these things, we want to know, what do we do? How do I manage them now that I'm aware of them? And this by no means is an exhaustive list of things that you may see and behaviors of your children. Again, you know them best. And so you may say, I know I'm learning how my child is experiencing stress. And so this is something that's a little out of the ordinary for him or her. So something that you're putting in the back of your mind. So when we talk about how to manage them, I think what's really cool is there's an author named Tina Payne Bryson. She wrote a book called The Whole Brain Child, and there's a couple of other books that she's written when it comes to parenting and when it comes to learning about our children's brains. And then one thing she wants us to consider during this time is how we would normally deal with our children if they had a physical ailment, like if they had a cold, or if they had the flu, or if they had an earache or a tummy ache. As parents and caregivers, we would normally be a little more patient because we know they're physically not feeling well. We normally kind of have a little more tolerance for their whining, a little more tolerance for their clinginess, because we know they're just not feeling well. And so she says that this is not too different from that. So it's not a physical ailment that they may be feeling. I mean, they may be feeling it physically, but it may not be a sickness like the cold or the flu or an earache, but there is something that they are struggling with. And so it's almost, we will deal with it the same way. And one of the first things that we would do is listen closely to them, listen to their fears. I know it's been normal. I've done it before. A kid would say something to me like, oh, this was so scary. And I said, that's not scary. Not understanding that, oh, I just kind of dismissed their feelings right there. I didn't really listen and validate that, oh, that must have been really scary for you in that moment. So listening really closely to what they're saying and what they're talking about. And at a preschool age, again, they may not be talking specifically about the pandemic or specifically about COVID-19. Their fears can show up in many different ways. So listening closely and then matching them where they are developmentally and putting them in control of how do you want to deal with that worry, or how do you want to deal with the scary that's happening, and you guys figure that out together. So definitely listening to what they're telling you. And then allowing for questions. Allow them to ask questions, and if you don't know the answer, that is totally okay. I have been all on Sesame Street and PBS and all social media, and they have so many really cool videos that I've learned from that explain kind of what's going on. How do we stay safe? How do we have fun during this time? So allow them to ask those questions. And again, at this preschool age, there may not be questions about the pandemic. They could be asking you about something totally different, but you answering that question still provides a sense of safety for what they're looking for. And then this one is a huge one, and it's my favorite. Play. Play, play, play. Play is so important when it comes to managing stressful situations for children, especially at this age. Play is the way that children communicate. Play is a child's words, right? They can't tell us, mom, dad, grandma, I need to sit down, I need to talk to you for a second. But what they can say is, can you play with me? And so that cry out, or that ask, I don't even say cry out, but that ask for can you play with me is, I need some connection. And in that moment, they feel security. And it says to them that an adult is delighting in me in this moment. An adult is making me feel safe and special. And especially if it's child-led and child-directed, it's something that I have some control over in this instance where so much is going around me that I don't have any control over. And so I always encourage parents that it doesn't have to be long stretches of time of play, because that could be exhausting for a parent, especially if you're still working. A lot of our parents are still essential workers, and you come home and your kids are wanting to play and you're like, ooh, I'm just not feeling it today. So it's not the duration of time that matters. A kid would rather you play with them 5 minutes or 10 minutes of focused attention every day than one day for 60 minutes. So it's more about the intensity than it is the duration. So definitely playing and laughter, using your free tools. And when I say free tools, I mean things like hugs and things like games that you guys play that's just special to your family, things that invite laughter and joy, because what it does is help buffer that stress. So play is a huge way to manage those anxieties and those fears. And a big one for adults is addressing our own stress and our own anxiety, being mindful of how we're feeling. Because our children, our preschoolers, they don't know exactly what's going on, but they can feel it. They're like little temperature takers. Like, I know, I don't know what's really happening. They're using this big coronavirus word, but I can feel that mom, dad, or grandma is feeling a little anxious and a little scared at this time. So how do we as adults address our own stress and anxiety? We've all heard of that analogy about being on the airplane and putting your mask on first, taking care of you before you take care of your child. The same in this moment. How are you addressing your stress and anxiety? And what does that look like when it comes to self-care? And so what we're doing right now, even though it's happening in the midst of a pandemic, is we're teaching children how to take care of their emotions, how to manage them, how to manage their reactions. We're teaching social emotional health in the moment. It may not feel like it right now, but we are in the moment of the time when we most need to teach ourselves and teach our children what it looks like to take care of ourselves. And so we always encourage parents to model that. If it's, I like to go for a walk, and this is how we as a family work through our emotions, or coming up with a breath. We always encourage teachers in their classrooms. They do this a lot at our Porter Leaf and Perea schools, of having students come up with their own type of breath, because we know how important deep breathing is for children and for us as adults. So if it's something, let's say you're the Johnson family and we've come up with our Johnson breath, and it's something we do in the morning when we wake up, and it may be something we do at night before bed, especially if we're seeing some of those nightmares happening. Using little family specific coping skills or family specific breathing techniques and modeling them as adults. And so that does two things. It helps you deal as an adult with your own stress and anxiety, and it models to the child that, you know, it's okay to feel these feelings. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared. But my mom, dad, or grandma has taught me how to take care of that feeling or how to manage that in the moment. And then a big one is avoiding media exposure. So paying attention to what we're listening to, how much we're listening to it. Sometimes we forget that we left the TV on, and you turn around and your child is sitting there in front of CNN. They don't know what they're watching, but it's just a whole bunch of stuff happening. So being careful of what we expose ourselves to, what we talk about in front of our children, how much we talk about it. So paying attention to that media. We want to stay up to date. We want to know what's going on. We want to know the facts, but not overexposing ourselves and our children to it. That helps us manage our own emotions again, and by way of that helps them manage their emotions. I think the biggest takeaway here is children are so resilient. They are so strong. And at this age, they really still working on the concept of time. So they're not stressed about at this point what next year looks like or what the fall looks like. They're living moment by moment by moment. And so that resilience for them helps us as adults understand in these small moments throughout the day, how am I buffering them with laughter? How am I buffering them with play, with a listening ear, with self-care, because they're just going a little moment at a time. They don't have yet that concept of, oh, what's going to happen next month? What's going to happen? That's our gift as adults that we have. So they're very strong and they're very resilient. And even though we've talked about at the beginning in that letter, we talked about teachers saying, you know, don't worry about the learning. We know that parents are I still want my kids to be learning in this moment. So after, you know, we've dealt with those fears and emotions, Tara's going to talk a little bit about how you can still, in the midst of this, keep that learning going.
Yeah, so as Stephanie was saying, the pressure, the feeling that we really want to be there for our kids and help that academic learning grow and continue, that's real. And I think we're all still trying to figure out how we do this learning from home situation. But we wanted to offer a few things that might help. So the first one is keeping some kind of routine or structure. Kids really respond to schedules and routines. And one of the reasons for that is that the predictability of knowing what's going to happen helps them feel safe. So Stephanie was kind of going over like those fears and anxieties that might be manifesting right now. When you can build a little bit of a routine or structure that helps kids to know, like, I know what's going to happen next. And so that helps me to feel a little bit safer. I know building a schedule and routine can be hard. I haven't really totally succeeded with that myself. And so I would recommend just starting small. I know Stephanie mentioned it would be really cool to start a family breathing exercise maybe in the morning or at night before bedtime. So that's a great way to just start with something small and build from there. And yeah, don't go out and get like your color coding schedule all crazy all at one time. Just take it slow and figure out what works for you. The second thing that I would talk about is play and connection. So Stephanie spoke about the importance of play managing stress. And at this age, children are learning through play. So all of your kiddos' teachers will tell you that at school, they're actually playing to learn skills. So when you're playing with your kid, you're going to be helping them to build some of the knowledge that they'll need when they go back to school. And I think Stephanie mentioned that, this doesn't have to be for a long period of time. I think even if you can find things that you're already doing, so if you're cooking and you want to invite your kiddo to come and maybe help you count green beans as you make them for dinner, or if you're folding laundry, it's really all kind of in your delivery, like, "Ooh, do you want to help me find the matching socks?" Finding ways to playfully engage around the things that you already have to do in your day. Kids really enjoy being helpful and doing grown-up big kid things. So that's another thing that you can do to help them continue to learn during this time. And then the last thing would be thinking about the expectations that you have for your kiddos. So I know some of you might be getting activities from school and wanting your kids to make sure that they complete those. And just knowing that at this age, 10 to 15 minutes is probably all that they can handle, no more than that for sure, at a time to be able to focus. So making sure that when you're asking them to complete an activity, that it's not too long. Remembering that at school, activities take longer because there's lots of other kids, and that kids are used to learning in a social environment where they're interacting with other people. At Momentous, we talk a lot about the brain. So something to keep in mind with your expectations for kiddos learning at this time is that when we're stressed, adults or kids, we can't learn. So if you're asking your child to complete an activity and they're really overwhelmed, maybe they're showing you that they're crying, they're upset, they're frustrated, that's them communicating to you that they're not able to learn in that moment. And it's okay to then take a break and try to figure out what your kid might need to be able to keep going. So maybe that's a moment of connection with you. Maybe it's a snack. Maybe it's a little bit of rest time. You can always go back to that activity later and make sure that they finish it. But just knowing if I kind of enter into a power struggle to try to make you do something right now, it's probably going to be stressful for me as the parent, and the child actually won't learn anything in that moment. So keeping that in mind and being kind to yourself through the process. So with that, the last few things that we wanted to touch on in this part of the webinar for today is first to trust yourself. So we hope that some of these suggestions and strategies will be helpful, but you know your kids and your family the best. So follow your instincts and do what you know is best for your family. The second thing, this is something that I learned from watching really good teachers. So Stephanie and I both support teachers in the classroom, and sometimes a teacher will have this brilliant lesson plan out for her kiddos. And this reminds me of things sometimes I try to do at home. It's just like I have this great plan of this activity that we're going to do, and then I get into the middle of it, or a teacher will get into the middle of it in her class, and it is just not working for whatever reason. It was planned so well, we had all the right ideas, but it's not working. And I always know a good teacher because she'll just stop that lesson and try something new. So if you're trying something and it's not working for you, just feel free to change it and try to figure out what would work better. And then I wanted to leave us with this idea of gratitude. So there's a lot of research that's come out showing that gratitude can really impact our level of well-being, so how we feel for adults and for kids. So in a time like this, when things are so stressful, I would encourage you and with your kiddos, if you can, to find things to be thankful for. And that doesn't mean that we ignore or dismiss how hard things are right now. It just means that we try to focus on at least a few good things that are happening. So I encourage you, our teachers do this with kids. They look for like 3 things to be grateful for. So that's something that you could do as a family, or if you're a family service worker, to recommend to families that you work with, finding even just 3 things each day that you're grateful for to help kind of shift how you're feeling during this time. So thank you guys so much for being with us today. At this time, Stephanie and I are going to shift and we're going to open up the Q&A. So if there's questions that you all are having that we haven't hit on yet, please feel free to pop them into the question and answer box. And I'll open up the And I know I mentioned before that we'll also be sending out a list of resources to the participants as well. Or was there anything that you guys were really hoping to gain from today that Stephanie and I haven't touched on? Feel free to shout out a topic too.
Well, thank you, Momentous. I follow you on Instagram.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
I did want to share a book that I read to kids. It's called Little Worm. I don't know if you. So in therapy, we call this bibliotherapy, but anytime you can find a book or a video or a YouTube video or anything that talks about an emotion and takes it away from the child feeling it themselves, it's very helpful to get the conversation started. So and now YouTube is so great, you can just type in the name of the book and sometimes they'll just read it to you. You don't even have to purchase it. So that's really cool.
And one of the resources that we'll send out is a little digital YouTube story about explaining the virus and staying home to kids. Stephanie and I are going to stay on just in case anyone wants to continue to chat or to come up with, if anybody has any questions, but we really appreciate everyone and thank you for your comments.
Looks like we have one question. All right, so the question says, let me click that off. I am concerned about children. So being concerned about children who are at home and exposed to maybe drug abuse or consumption of alcohol. I know this is a big fear for a lot of our parents. A lot of our teachers and family service workers, because we know that school was that safe place, right? It was that place where our kids went to just get a release, and now they're at home. And so a lot of what we talk about, which is, as you guys know, I'm sure you guys are all mandated reporters and things like that, is really focusing on, and Tara, you can definitely step in too, really focusing on what we can control, right? What is in our circle of control, what's in our circle of influence, and if we see something, it's also been a huge concern of mine too, wondering, what's going on. And if we see something as counselors and social workers and teachers, taking that step to do what we have to do to make sure those kids are safe, to make sure that they are safe in their environment. And that's always a hard decision. It always has been a hard decision for me to make too in those moments. So it's definitely a concern. Even in Dallas, we've had a lot of child abuse cases, unfortunately, go up during this time, going up at this time. So it's definitely on the radar.
Yeah. And I think that's something, Stephanie, that you're talking about that will continue. We hope we can continue to talk with you all throughout this time. And as we go back, I think kiddos in those situations will need even more support as we come back to school. Stephanie, did you see the question about who the author of the book is?
Yes, I'm typing it right.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Another question. Okay.
Oh yeah, another key.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Tara, you hit on it too. I think one thing that we've been talking about a lot is once school starts back, that there's going to be a lot of buffering and a lot of repairing that as teachers, school staff, that we're going to have to do. There's going to be a window of tolerance that we're going to have, especially for our preschoolers. When they start school anyway, that first 2 to 3 weeks, we're just like, I'm just trying to get a routine down. If everybody can just sit on the carpet, that would be great. But knowing anyway, after all of this, we're definitely going to have to open some space to be able to support them socially and emotionally, because there are going to be a lot of questions. They're going to be excited about seeing their friends and things like that. But it's important for us to be mindful and proactive about that. For families as a whole, we're going to be supporting them in a totally different way when school starts back.
And I know we have another question coming up, but just to jump in with Stephanie there, I think we have a lot of family service workers with us too. And I think for me, I know as a parent, I have made so many mistakes during this time with my stress level being up. And I think as you're communicating with families, just reminding them that they can start repairs now when they make mistakes, just to talk to their kiddos and that it's okay to know that we're not going to be perfect during this time, just to go ahead and start kind of acknowledging that with our kiddos and our families and keep trying, keep doing our best.
And then we have a question about recommendations for support staff so they can support their families upon return to work. I think the biggest, most important thing about that is taking care of yourself right now, because we are, as helpers of the helpers, if you're a support staff, you're a container. We talk a lot about the teacup and being there for the overflow, but sometimes the saucer in the teacup, we're the saucer, it overflows just as much. We can only do so much. So step one right now, taking care of yourself. And just like any behavior, once it happens once, it can always be predicted. So because we already know, okay, when school starts back upon returning to work, not only are our students going to need some support socially and emotionally, our teachers are going to need some support socially and emotionally. So just like we were talking about play being important for children, play in the adult world is just as important. And that could look like making sure first day of school, and Porter Lee does this amazingly, getting everybody excited, saying hi, being kind is the coolest thing you could do, no matter what's coming at you from the other end. Being kind, having grace for the teachers that come in, because understanding that they've been living their own life. We've talked to a lot of teachers who have experienced some death, lots of grief, whether it be physical death or just the grief of losing closure from not being able to see their students. So if you're a support staff, number one, support yourself and prepare for when that's going to happen, because we already know that's a gift. We already know when we come back, we're going to have to be full and ready to do what it is we are called, we're supposed to do. And then two, really give that grace and those little small micro moments of, we call it oxytocin bursts. Oxytocin is like the love hormone, but even if it's just a high five or a wave, I don't even know if we can high five by that time, but you know, a wave, being really kind to our teachers that come in and making sure if we're meeting with them at the beginning that we have some space to check in. How are you doing? You know, how are things going? And asking, how are you doing twice? Because we know that first time is usually, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. But if you're a specialist or you're an advisor, and if you're a coach and you have the gift of working with a teacher one-on-one, being able to say, no, I'm really, you know, before we get into all of this class scores and evaluations and all that kind of stuff, I just want to check in to see how you're doing and how I can best support you during this time. And it's been my experience, I don't know if it's been yours, Tara, that when you ask that from a genuine place, the second time, the first time you're going to get that, you know, fake answer. When you ask that the second time, teachers really say, what I really need is this. What I really need is that. this curriculum, I'm struggling. And it doesn't mean you have to change anything. I think as support staff, we think as soon as they give us information, okay, I got to go and change things. In that moment, I just need some validation. I just need, that is stressful. Yeah, this is hard coming back. How can I support you in that? So I think just being proactive. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's so important. As you were talking, Stephanie, I was thinking about a conversation we had with a principal that we're working with yesterday. And she was saying during this time, she's even made it a priority just to do like a little virtual check-in. So even before you go back to school, but really that she has no agenda other than to check in and see how people are doing. And that might look different for each teacher that she works with, but trying to build up that support. And like Stephanie said, not needing to necessarily even do anything, just allowing your staff to feel heard and seen, because we know that when they feel heard and seen, they'll help kids to feel heard and seen. So it's like that parallel process all the way through.
Another question. So what can we do to help parents with some of the fears and the uncertainty they may be facing in the future when their children are around? So how are we helping parents with their fears? Tara, you have?
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, when their children are around, so I'm wondering if that question too is around, like, how do you talk about it when the kids might overhear? Is that, I don't know if that was part of the question as well. I think kind of just as Stephanie mentioned with kids, a lot of these processes are really parallel. So I think when you're talking to parents and families, just even, I was going to talk about this at the beginning and I did it, but reflecting back some of what they're saying. So, you know, as family service workers, or I'm a social worker, Stephanie's play therapist, we act as mirrors. So mirroring back to people the emotions that they're hearing, that you hear them telling you about. So, you know, when am I going to go back to work? Wow, I hear you're really worried about what it's going to look like when you go back to work. So just even reflecting back some of what you're hearing can help ease some of the anxiety and the fear, even when we don't have the answers. Because the reality is that we don't have all the answers right now about what the future will be.
And I know with technology too, when their children are around, we were talking to a teacher and she wanted to share some very sensitive information, but her child was like, you know, right there. As they are. And so we experimented with the chat, right? So if there's any way that you can find another way. So whether it's, we use the chat. So she was chatting in kind of what she's going through and what she's feeling, and even said, I can't say this out loud right now, but I do want to process and talk about this. Or a lot of our parents are really good with text messaging. So if, you know, this is something you would just kind of, you rather text me and we kind of go back and forth, or email, because it is really hard when you have preschoolers trying to have a conversation, because they always wait till you get on the phone.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm not paying attention, but as soon as you get on that phone, they want that attention. And also another technique that we use that you can tell parents about, it's called the 30-second burst of attention. So when a child is, as they are wanting your attention right when you get on that phone, mostly what they just want you to make eye contact, right? And so we tell them, just give them a 30-second burst of attention. So the other person on the phone should be an adult, and so they should be able to hold off for 30 seconds. So being able to say, give me 1 second and talk to your child and say, is there something that you need right now? And if they say, most of the time it's like, no, or yes. And so you either, if it's something that can happen quick, you go ahead and do it, or you say, well, remember, I'm on the phone right now. Can you go do this until I'm prepared? But most of the time they just need that burst. Because usually when you go back and say, okay, so what is it that you needed? What do they say? Oh, I don't know. I forgot. I don't remember. So just that little 30-second burst. So definitely you trying to use the chat or any other ways to communicate with parents if they have kiddos around and they're really needing to process through some emotions and they can't physically get up and move, because they may be single parents and I can't leave a child in the house. And then also letting them know, you know, it's okay if you want to give them that little burst of attention and get them set up, and then we can come, have this conversation later. I don't know if that answers the question, but those are some things that we kind of just worked with.
Yeah, I know that's hard to navigate.
Yeah, really hard. Because our parents are feeling so many fears. I was telling Tara, a parent texted me yesterday and just said, Stephanie, are the kids going to be okay?
Yeah.
I'm like, they're going to be okay. Are you okay? Most of the time, it's us. It's the parents. It's the adults. And rightfully so, because we know so much more than our kiddos know. We know so much more to be worried about than they know, which is why we talk about managing our own emotions and taking time to take care of ourselves, because that will then spill over to them when we're taking care of that.
Yeah. And sometimes that's just faking it till we make it too.
Exactly.
We might be worried and anxious, but we know in this moment, I'm gonna say that everything's gonna be okay and that we're gonna be safe and we're gonna be fine. Or I'm gonna do this breathing exercise and show you that I can calm myself down. So
I'm gonna call my best friend and be like, "Oh my God, you mean
it's
important to have somebody to talk to?" And
like, oh, my daughter said we're all gonna die and maybe freak me out. It's okay.
Community is even more important.
Yes.
During this time. Okay, we have 4 minutes for any last questions. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys for joining us.
For listening, and hopefully this is definitely helpful for you and the parents you work with, even the children that you might have. And we can't wait to come back to Memphis. We miss you guys. And feel free to, since a lot of you guys are new to Momentous, check out our website. There's lots of blogs, lots of videos, our YouTube channel.
Yeah, the YouTube channel.
You can send to parents about really quick breathing techniques and activities. I've been following Porter Leaf on Instagram. I just saw Miss Valerie do a really cool shape activity. So just kind of check out those different resources on our website. On Korea has a lot on their YouTube. So see what's going on in your own community, and also us at Momentous as a resource. All right, so if there are no more questions, we love giving back the gift of time. We're giving you back 5 minutes.
The rest of your day.
We hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Find some room for joy this weekend, laughter.
Yes.
And we look forward to seeing you again sometime. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone.